Summer, the time we want to be outside, the hottest time of the year, the time we want to spend with our families. But even in this bright and shiny time of the year, there is darkness that awaits. These are true stories that take place during the beautiful time of summer. Make sure to like and subscribe for more. Now, let's get into it. I had a summer job when I was a 15-year-old girl that was a few miles from my house. I lived in a rural wooded area, and my parents would never let me go into the woods by myself, but they worked days, and my job started at noon every day, so I had to walk to work. I chose to disobey them and walk through the woods instead of on the road to work because it cut about half a mile off my walk. At the same time, I'd walk through the very much abandoned state forest down a deer path for about a mile or so until it was intercepted at a railroad track. Then I'd walk a couple more miles down the railroad tracks into town to my job. Stupid, I know, but I was 15. Taking this path always freaked me out because it always felt like I was being watched, but it was shorter and less sunny and less hot, so I ignored my instincts, thinking my parents' influence was just making me paranoid. My parents would pick me up after my shift, unaware of my daily routine. This continued for weeks. One day, I'm walking about a mile from my house, deep in the woods, and there are two porn magazine pages that had been ripped out and placed on the trail facing me. They hadn't been there the day before. I was completely creeped out, as they were clearly intentionally placed and probably for me, since very few people utilize this area, but I kept walking because if I turned around at this point, I'd have further to go to get out of the woods, and there was a huge hill to climb to get back to my house, and no one would be around there to help me anyway. This was a densely wooded area with brambles and dogwood and rolling hills, so I couldn't see very far in any direction. Suddenly, I could hear someone else walking close by. I stopped, and I would hear them for a split second, and then they would stop. They sounded like they had change in their pocket, so I knew it wasn't an animal because of the echo. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Just to check that I wasn't crazy, I stopped once before I heard the same noise, which quickly stopped when I stopped. That's when I knew I was being stalked. My heart was racing with fear and my vision went blurry, but my instincts told me not to speak and not to run, but just to keep walking down the dense deer path further into the woods. My gut told me not to look back behind me. I could hear that there was someone right behind me on the deer path, but now I did not look back. Now, I'm rather short, slightly chubby person, always have been, and looking at me, you'd probably assume I couldn't run very fast, so if you wanted to catch me deep in the woods, you might assume you'd have plenty of time to do so. And looking back, I think that's exactly what this creep was thinking. But back then, I ran cross-country and track. I could even run a 7-minute mile in hills were my specialty. But certainly, I was likely faster than whatever pedo creep was hanging out in the woods, stalking a little girl. It's not that I was processing this thought at the time, I was just instinctively knew not to run. Yet. I kept walking, seemingly deeper into the woods because I knew the train track was up ahead, where there would be more space to run without tripping or getting caught in the tree branches. It was terrifying to not look back, but something told me not to. I felt my entire body was shutting down. It's a feeling I've never felt before or after that day. It was the feeling of just being prey. Everything went blurry. I could feel my blood pulsing in my ears and my heart was pounding. I just kept walking like nothing was happening and did not turn around because I could feel someone maybe 5 or 10 feet behind me at this point, following me for a good 1/8 of a mile. I didn't turn around. I didn't scream because I knew no one would hear me. As soon as I got nearer to the train tracks, which were elevated along a man-made gravel mound, I ran. And then I ran on all fours up the hill, grabbing on weeds to pull myself up faster, and then sprinted along the tracks as fast as my lungs and my legs could carry me. I heard and saw branches snapping below me in the woods, but now I was out in the sun, and the woods were dark, so I couldn't see what was behind me. I just kept sprinting. I never even saw the person, but I knew their intentions were awful. I never cut through the woods again, and I didn't mention what happened until I was 18 and moved out of the house. I was far too afraid of being grounded. It was the middle of summer, and my group of friends had decided to have a sleepover at my friend Sarah's house. Sarah's parents were going away for the weekend, leaving the house to us girls to, well, have it to ourselves. Excited for a night of fun and freedom, we gathered our sleeping bags, snacks, and horror movies, ready for a night we would never forget. So we thought. As the sun began to set, we settled in for a movie marathon in the living room, the laughter and chatter filling the room as we watched one horror movie after another. But then the tension in the room started to grow as the movies became scarier, and we began to jump at every creak and rustle in the house. Eventually, it was time for bed, and we headed upstairs to Sarah's room. We had set up the sleeping bags on the floor, trying to ignore the eerie feeling that had settled over the house. Sarah turned off the lights and we settled in for the night, trying to shake that unease that crept over our minds, as teenagers tend to do. As the night went on, strange things started to happen. We heard footsteps in the hallway, even though we were the only ones in the house. Shadows seemed to dance at the corner of our vision, disappearing when they turned to look. Air in the room grew colder, sending shivers down my spine. One by one, we began to feel a sense of dread creep over the room. Whispers echoed in my ears, too quiet to make out the words, but loud enough to give me chills. Sarah's cat, normally friendly and affectionate, hissed and arched its back, staring at a spot in the room that none of us girls could see. As the clock struck midnight, we heard a loud crash coming from the kitchen. We froze, the sound echoing in the silent house. Sarah mustered up her courage and grabbed a flashlight, leading us downstairs to investigate. The kitchen was in shambles, pots and pans scattered across the floor as if they had been thrown. We all exchanged frightened looks, my heart racing as we tried to come up with a logical explanation for what had happened, but deep down, we all knew that something supernatural was at play. Trembling with fear, we made our way back upstairs, trying to calm ourselves down, but as we reached the top of the stairs, we heard a low, guttural growl coming from the darkness below. Panic set in, we ran for Sarah's room, slamming the door shut behind us. We huddled together on the floor, trying to make sense of what was happening. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows more menacing, and the feeling of dread thickened in the air. We knew we were not alone in the house, and whatever was with us was not friendly. As the night wore on, we huddled together, waiting for the sun to rise and banish the terrifying presence that haunted us. Finally, at first light of dawn, as it crept through the curtains, I dared to open the door and venture out into the house. To my relief, the house was empty, and the sense of foreboding lifted as the morning sun chased away the darkness. To this day, I don't know what had happened, or if it was just all my imagination or our imagination. But as the years have gone by, I still have not forgotten that one summer's night. I never thought my summer job at the local theme park, Thrillville, would turn into a nightmare. We'll call it Thrillville just so I don't give away where I am. It was supposed to be a fun way to earn some extra cash before heading off to college in the fall. I mean, who wouldn't want to spend their days surrounded by screaming roller coasters, greasy funnel cakes, and the constant smell of sweat and sunscreen? My job was manning the Ferris wheel, one of the park's oldest rides, but also one of the most popular. There was something about the slow, creaking rotation and the breathtaking view from the top that drew people in. I didn't mind the job too much. It was pretty chill aside from having to deal with occasional puker and whatnot. You know how it is. But then, things started to get weird. At first, it was just little things. A stuffed animal left behind in a seat, a forgotten hat, no big deal, right? But then I started noticing it was in the same seat, 3C. And it wasn't just trash. I'd find all sorts of creepy stuff. A child's shoe, a broken toy, a photo of a little boy with a sad face. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feelings that something was off. The Ferris wheel seemed different. It would groan and creak more than usual, even when it was empty, and all the seats would swing back and forth by themselves like someone was sitting there, pushing them. One night I was closing down the ride and I saw a kid sitting in 3C. He was small, with messy brown hair and a faded blue t-shirt. I felt a chill run down my spine as he looked at me with empty eyes. I tried to talk to him, but he didn't respond, and then suddenly, he vanished. I knew that the Ferris wheel was haunted. I tried to avoid the ride as much as possible, but my boss got pissed when I kept calling in sick, so I had to face my fears. Every time I ran the ride, I would see that little boy at the corner of my eye. He was always in 3C. One day, I decided to do some research. I dug through old newspapers and talked to some of the park's longtime employees. Then I found out there was an accident. Years ago, a little boy had fallen to his death from the Ferris wheel. He was wearing a faded blue t-shirt. I knew that was the time to get out of there. I quit my job and never went back there, but I'll never forget that little boy in 3C and the haunted Ferris wheel on his ghostly playground. Nobody ever believes me when I tell this story, but I know it was true. You can believe me or not, but I will never go back to Thrillville again.